On the morning of June 24, 2015, the Moka espresso bar on Islington Avenue, just south of Highway 7 in Vaughan, Ontario, was a picture of routine. It was about 8:15 a.m., a time when employees and regulars were settling in, preparing for the breakfast rush. But in an instant that peace was shattered. A lone gunman, clad in a light gray hooded sweatshirt and a mask, emerged from a dark-colored compact car and walked toward the cafe with purpose, according to police. Witnesses say he carried himself with a chilling calm. In surveillance footage, his face is hidden, his identity obscured. He didn't meander, he strode in, and within seconds drew a firearm. The first shots rang out, then more, a volley of 11 bullets that transformed a quiet morning into a massacre. Inside the cafe, the shooter unleashed his violence on 4 people. Among them were Maria Voci, a 47-year-old woman who worked at Moka and was known and loved by the local community, and Christopher de Simone, a 24-year-old regular patron. Both were fatally shot and pronounced dead at the scene. 2 other men survived. One was listed in stable condition, the other in critical, life-threatening condition. York Regional Police described the suspect as a black male, about 5'10" to 5'11", who exited the cafe after the shooting and fled south on Islington Avenue in the same compact car he arrived in. Within days, police located the vehicle, a 2011 black Nissan Versa, stolen just a few days before the attack. The plate was identified as BVLW 273. As the community reeled, friends and neighbors rushed to the crime scene, tears and confusion everywhere. Maria Voci was remembered as a warm, giving mother of 3 who woke early and worked long hours. Her cafe job was more than just a paycheck. It was part of her heart. Christopher de Simone was a young man full of promise, recently married and employed at a banquet hall in Woodbridge. His wife, panting and distraught, appeared on camera outside the cafe trying to call him. For many, the violence felt senseless. Some whispered that it couldn't be random. Others feared it was a sinister act linked to deeper underworld forces. Yet for all the horror, police said they didn't yet see clear gang or mafia ties. Constable Andy Pattenden insisted they were investigating every possible angle, but they were keeping an open mind about motive. The day after the shooting, they began canvassing the area, asking local businesses and drivers whether anyone saw something or someone suspicious. Then, in what would become a major turning point, investigators revealed something chilling. A secret gambling operation hidden in the back room of the cafe. Behind a discreet door, they found card tables, electronic gaming machines, and what looked like debt lists tucked inside a safe. This raised an eerie question. Was Moka more than just a coffee shop? A front for illicit gambling? A gathering spot for those who owed and those who collected? Some criminal justice experts weighed in. Organized crime, especially in York Region, has a long history of using gambling operations to launder money and assert dominance. And although police did not publicly tie the shooting to mafia families, the presence of that backroom gambling fueled speculation. Was this a vengeance killing? A payback for debts measured in more than just money? Still, for many, the idea that such an operation could lead to a double homicide in broad daylight didn't sit right. Some questioned whether the shooter, later identified as Hay, had targeted someone specific, only to lash out when he didn't find who he was looking for. Others wondered if a debt had gone unpaid, or if the cafe had become entangled in the kind of disputes that escalate quickly in the criminal underworld. Over the next weeks, the investigation intensified. Detectives executed dozens of search warrants and conducted more than 130 interviews, according to York Regional Police reports. Cell tower data, license plates, surveillance video, every lead was pursued. Investigators uncovered footage of a Nissan Versa being driven into an industrial area in Etobicoke just hours after the shooting. Around the same time, they matched Hayes' cell phone activity to calls placed near that spot. Then came the arrest. On August 14, 2015, heavily armed officers executed a high-risk takedown on Highway 400 near Barrie. As traffic crawled toward cottage country, unmarked SUVs surged in, boxed in a rental vehicle, and tactical officers swarmed out. In a matter of moments, 27-year-old Jason Hay was handcuffed. Police say he was armed. A 25-year-old woman, Tashari Bennett, was also arrested. She was accused of being an accessory after the fact. Hay was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Vaughan and Simone, and 2 counts of attempted murder for the 2 men who survived. What followed would be a courtroom battle that exposed chilling truths about motive, identity, and accountability. In May 2018, a jury heard the prosecution's case. They were shown surveillance video of the shooter entering the cafe, then retreating, then returning to fire 11 rounds. Witnesses testified about what they saw: the calm stride, the purposeful entrance, the sudden eruption of violence. They were shown the stolen Nissan Versa, previously caught on camera in Etobicoke. Cell phone records placed Hay near a Burger King shortly after the crime. The Crown argued he called a taxi from there to hide his trail. Perhaps most damning was the evidence found at arrest: a balaclava with Hay's DNA, seemingly linking him directly to the masked shooter. In addition to that, his prior criminal record, 58 convictions, including weapons offenses, violence, and manslaughter, painted the picture of a man steeped in crime. The defense tried to sow doubt. Hay's lawyer, Jordana Goldust, argued that the man in the video appeared darker and heavier than her client. She accepted the Crown's sentencing recommendation, a rare move, saying her client told her not to bother contesting it, believing he'd never be granted parole anyway. Beyond the legal arguments, victim impact statements struck the court. Gaetano Di Pietro, who survived but was shot in the neck, spoke of living in constant fear. He told the court that dark, angry, callous eyes would forever be burned into his memory. De Simone's mother, her voice trembling, likened losing her son to fighting a chronic disease, a pain with no cure. When the verdict came down on May 18, 2018, the jury found Hay guilty on all counts: 2 first-degree murders and 2 attempted murders. In a sentencing hearing just weeks later, the Crown and defense jointly submitted, and the judge agreed, to 4 consecutive life sentences, meaning Hay must serve at least 50 years before even being eligible for parole. What made that sentence especially notable? Hay became one of just a handful of Canadians ever handed consecutive life terms. The court made it clear this was no ordinary crime. The unrelenting violence, the cold premeditation, the mystery of motive demanded a punishment that reflected the gravity of the act. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, Hay made only a brief statement. "I still maintain my innocence," he said. Despite his protestations, the judge believed the evidence was overwhelming, and that there was no reasonable prospect of rehabilitation for Hay. For the families of Vaughan and de Simone, the verdict brought some sense of closure, but not peace. Maria's 3 sons, now without their mother, would carry her memory into their futures. Christopher's wife, his colleagues, and his community would forever be haunted by what happened in that otherwise ordinary cafe. Neighbors recalled how vibrant and kind Maria was, how Christopher smiled so easily, and how the shooter shattered all of it without warning. In the end, the Moka Café shooting was more than a mass shooting. It was an act drenched in mystery. Was the real motive tied to the gambling operation in the backroom? Did debts run deeper than anyone knew? The shooting became a case that symbolized a deeper truth about modern suburban Canada, and more pointedly, about Jason Hay. Crime doesn't always lurk in dim back alleys or in the shadows of big city nightlife. In this instance, the violence walked straight through the front door of a neighborhood cafe in the broad light of day. Hay, a man with a long criminal record, entered the Moka Café that morning wearing a mask, calm yet coldly determined. The scene shattered any illusion that suburbia is inherently safe. It wasn't just random violence. It carried a sense of being planned, controlled, and deeply personal. Behind the facade of normalcy, the cafe harbored a hidden world. Was Hay targeting someone tied to that gambling operation, or was this a more symbolic act tied to debts, retribution, or power? The ambiguity of motive made it all the more terrifying for the community. Something dark was happening in plain sight, in a place where people come for coffee and conversation. Hay's capture was as dramatic as the crime itself. A high-risk takedown on Highway 400, tactical officers surrounding his car, bringing a violent career criminal to heel. When he was finally put on trial, The severity of his past became painfully clear: 58 convictions, including weapons charges, violence, and manslaughter. The jury saw evidence: surveillance footage, cell phone data, the stolen getaway car. They saw a man methodical, deliberate, and willing to destroy lives. Even with suspects identified and charges laid, the why behind the violence felt fractured, incomplete. Rumors circulated, theories spread, and the community filled in the blank spaces with their own versions of the story. But the full, definitive explanation never quite settled. And maybe that was the most unsettling truth of all: that in the quiet corners of suburban Canada, sometimes the answers stay hidden, and the shadows don't come from dark alleys. They come from the spaces we thought were safe. Police never definitively declared the motive, and the questions linger. The case remains one of Vaughan's darkest moments. A brutal display of violence that tore through a community long considered safe, carried out in plain daylight by a masked shooter, leaving 2 lives ended and 2 more irrevocably changed. Jason Hay, now in prison, will spend decades behind bars. But for the families he devastated, and the city he shocked, the echoes of that morning will never fade.